Good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar entitled The New World Order of College Softball Recruiting. I'm BJ Schecter, editor and publisher of Baseball America and Softball America, and I will be your host and moderator for tonight's event. With the cancellation of all spring seasons at the high school and collegiate levels, and the NCAA's decision to allow seniors who lost their seasons to gain an extra year of eligibility, which incidentally is the right move, the landscape has dramatically changed. Everything you have learned or have been told up to this point is now out the window. Tonight, we'll look at the New World Order with a panel of experts in the field who, like all of you, are figuring it out on the fly as things change nearly every day. In fact, just last week, we learned that the dead period in recruiting has been extended until July 31st, making things significantly more difficult. Before introducing our panel, tonight's webinar is brought to you by the 3-2 Count Foundation, a new nonprofit organization whose mission is to help underprivileged youth reach their baseball and softball dreams. We need more organizations like the 3-2 Count Foundation. I believe so strongly in the organization's mission, I agreed earlier last year to join their board. Tonight's event is being conducted on Zoom and live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Now to our panel. We are honored and privileged to be joined by some of the leading experts in the sport of softball who have vast experience for many years in the game. So introducing the panel, first we have Kayla Lombardo, who's Softball America's editor and a former Division I softball player at Fordham, where she was team captain. Kayla also spent 2 years as the Division I assistant coach at Lehigh University and now gives private lessons in her free time. Next, we have Alex Martens, who recently graduated from the University of Kentucky and was a 4-year starter at second base for the Wildcats. This past season, she led the nation in RBIs before the season was cut short due to the COVID pandemic. Alex was the best hitter in the country and was named an All-American by Softball America. She had a chance to come back for a 5th year, but decided to forego her final year of eligibility to earn a master's degree and pursue a career in advertising. Next, we have Elise Fortier, who coaches with the Rhode Island Thunder, a top travel organization in New England. She played softball at Fordham and was the Atlantic 10 Conference Player of the Year in 2014 and helped Fordham win 2 A10 championships. Next, we have Michaela Transue, who's a volunteer assistant coach at the University of Missouri. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree from Hofstra, where she played softball and helped the Pride to 2 CAA championships. And finally, we have Dr. Chris Seedham, who's the founder and president of Perfect Match, a marketing and mentoring company for student athletes and their families. Chris is a former pitcher at Division III Haverford College, and earned his PhD in chemistry from UCLA. Spent nearly 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry. He spent the last 15 plus years in coaching and has assisted nearly 200 student athletes in finding the right opportunities in college. So welcome, panelists. Tonight, we're going to divide the webinar into various segments. At the end, we'll leave some time for the audience to ask questions. However, if you have a pressing question that deals with a segment that we're dealing with in real time or talking about in real time, please use the chat function and ask your question, and we'll get to some of the questions during the webinar itself, or at least during the segments. Now to the first segment, the new world and what does it look like? In college, there's a huge logjam now that seniors rightfully have the chance to come back for an additional year. Most high school seasons were either cut short or didn't happen at all. So the ability for coaches to get out and see players this spring was all but lost. The summer is in question. We're not exactly sure what it looks like, although some tournaments and events are happening slowly but surely. So I'm going to start with you, Kayla. What does the new world look like to you? And you're obviously seeing it from all sides, former coach, from the media side, the high school side, and the college side.
First off, I just want to say thank you to 3-2 Count Foundation for putting this event together and for having me here today. We appreciate all the work that you do. But yeah, BJ, it's an interesting time out there. I think a lot of people are uncertain as to how this is going to impact the long-term future of softball, both on the college level and at the youth level. I think on the college level, we've seen things kind of come to a head a bit. In the past couple of days, we saw Wright State just cut their program, the first Division I program, to do so. The transfer portal has been blowing up this spring, and we've seen just tons of names. You know, every week there's dozens more names. So I think people are kind of hitting the panic button. But with that said, I think, you know, we're all kind of in the same boat here. You know, the recruiting situation has been turned on its head a bit. So people have had to get really creative with how they're going to go about getting recruited this summer. And a lot of things have become digital, as we're doing right now. We're able to have this conference. So I think it's a scary time, but it's also an interesting time for innovation and for people to get creative with their recruiting, and also how teams are staying connected at the college and the youth level. So you know, there's uncertainty right now, but there's opportunity too. It's just going to look a little different going forward.
Michaela, you're in the center of the storm right now at the Division I level in the SEC with your Tigers program. What does it look like for you? What does your roster look like, and how are you recruiting and managing that pipeline?
So our roster has been pretty big the past couple of years, and it just got even bigger due to COVID. We didn't have any seniors that could come back. We only had one that graduated. But leading into our juniors, who again get that year back, everybody gets it back, not just the seniors. So we have 8 juniors in that class, and seeing them for a whole nother year, because they're all going to be here again, it's going to impact our roster for the next 5, 6, maybe 10 years, where we're going to be carrying 34 next year. And that in softball is a huge roster. And only being able to travel with 22 most of the time, that gives a lot of, you know, ifs and where we're going to have people in the lineup and who's going to be traveling. So it definitely impacts a lot. And on top of that, you know, all these programs have had budget cuts too. So that has just impacted all the way through. And I cannot even imagine what some of these mid-majors are going through right now. Our athletic department got a 20% cut all the way through. And as a Power 5, that hurts, but I can't imagine what that's like at some of the mid-major programs. So it's definitely a different world, and we're going to figure out how to get through it, but it's going to be difficult.
Alex, you had a tough decision to make, whether to come back for a 5th year and get your senior season back. You decided to, you know, start and pursue a career starting with a master's degree. How difficult was that decision? And the second part of that is, you know, what sort of advice would you give to other seniors that are faced with that very same decision? So take us through your process.
Yeah, it honestly was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, but I'm so happy for the seniors and the people that do get to go back, because it's an amazing opportunity. And what the NCAA did, even though it is causing all these uncertain questions being answered, it was the right thing to do for so many people. I mean, as softball players and as female athletes, you know, we kind of have to set ourselves up for the future. If you don't see your future staying in softball coaching or going to the NPF, then you have to continue on with a career path. So many of my seniors and I started that career path early our sophomore year of college, and we were on a path all the way through, committed to job offers and already paying for master's programs before season even started. So we were on a path well before any of this started, and it definitely was a hard decision to make. I kind of left Lexington as soon as everything happened, came back home and sat here, and a lot of people were pressing the question, like, are you coming back? Are you coming back? Are you coming back? And you just have to sink into your own thoughts and make the best decision for yourself. Because if you think about what could happen next year, what could not happen next year, it can really cloud your judgment. So I had to make the best decision for myself longevity wise, and just really focus on that one fact, I guess. So it was really hard, but for those that do get to go back, you're going to have an amazing time because you already know what to expect. you're going to have to deal with probably everything that's going on right now more than I do, because I'm kind of separated from it. I'm an outsider looking in. But for those that are trying to make the decision, you just have to make a decision that's best for yourself. Like it's selfish to say, but in the end, you only have one life. And if you want to be on the field for as long as you can, you make the decision to do that. If you want to set yourself up for what you truly desire, which I truly desire, or a career in advertising, then you go and make that decision. So
great. Well, congratulations on making that decision. I'm sure it was incredibly difficult. Elise, as a former college player, you're now on the other side where you're coaching and you're trying to get young girls to the next level, whether it's Division I, Division II, Division III. Obviously, the world right now, the players that you're trying to send to the next level is much different than the world that you entered. How are you seeing it, and how are you advising your players?
Well, I got to be honest, at first we were obviously freaking out like how most of the country was in their own way. But actually we are very optimistic in the last couple of weeks. We've invested in a video live program, Athletes Go Live. And we actually think that especially a travel ball organization out of the Northeast that, with the weather that we're dealt with through the fall, especially, we don't exactly have the advantages as a team in Florida or California or Texas to be able to play as often as possible and get in front of these colleges as often as possible. So now with this Athletes Go Live or other forms of video streaming, we're actually very optimistic in the opportunities of our 22 class. We have 10 kids in the 22 class. All of our 2021s are luckily committed. So we're pretty excited about this summer. We finalized our schedule, and most of the tournaments that we're in already are going to be streaming the games themselves. But now we're going to also be bringing our camera and our network. So we'll be able to hopefully reach actually more coaches than anticipated.
Great. No, that's awesome. Chris, you've mentored student athletes for some time now. What are your conversations like with the players that you're coming into contact with and their families?
Well, I'm going to try to actually pick a few things from what the girls have said here. Kayla talked about uncertainty, right? So that's maybe the biggest one. There's just a ton of uncertainty, right? We get asked a lot of questions, and the real honest answer so many times is, well, we just really don't know. We're all thinking about it, man. We're working on it, but we just don't really know. Uncertainty. I also like the way she talked about opportunity. Opportunity. There's always opportunity everywhere. I know times are tough, but there's opportunity. If you look at what we do, if you look at what I do, what are we really doing? It's all training for 20 years from now. And so that's really kind of what we're talking about. Can we get through this? Do we know how do we get through this? There's opportunity. Alex talked about goals for me. She's making a decision about, do I come back? Do I not come back? Where am I going? A lot of kids struggle when they move on to college. They don't get enough opportunity. They don't get the right opportunity. They go to the wrong program in the wrong school. One of the big reasons is they have not spent enough time thinking about their goals. Who are they? What do they need? What do they think they need? So for me, goals is really important. Michaela was kind of interesting. It's the question of how many years. Oh, we got this backlog. The dominoes are falling in reverse order. Extra year of eligibility. How does it change the recruiting process? How does it change my roster? I think you actually said, oh, it might affect up to 10 years. 10 years is about as long as I've heard, but I think that's an open question, right? How long is it going to affect kids? Elise kind of talked about the 22s. I've spent a lot of time thinking about 20s because there's still 20s that can play and there's opportunities for 20s. The 21s are still freaking out a little bit because the whole world's been topsy-turvy. 22s, I'm not thinking that much about the 22s, at least in fast pitch. I think things are going to start to stabilize a little bit better with the 22s and the 23s. Because again, going back to Alex, how many kids are really going to come back for that extra year? You know, at Mizzou, it's not the returning Seniors, it's what's going to happen with the next classes. How many of those are coming back? That's pretty hard to predict. I don't know if you've gone through that, Michaela. What are you guys thinking? Are you guys thinking about coming back? But I mean, again, a lot of uncertainty. So our major message to kids that we're talking about right now is recruiting doesn't stop and never stops. Recruiting has not stopped. You can call it a dead period or you can call it anything you want. Coaches are not done evaluating kids. They have roster needs. They have to fill them. So recruiting hasn't stopped, but you got to know what to do, right? I think proper guidance has really become much more important, whether it's coming from your club. Some clubs do better than others, whether it's coming from a high school coach, whether it's coming from a private instructor, whether it's coming from mom and dad, or whether it's coming from someone like me, right? It's the guidance. That's what kids and families really need.
Thank you, Chris. Sticking to this year and here and now, one thing that has been talked about a lot is the transfer portal, and it's never been fuller or more active. I know that's something you monitor all the time, Michaela. I'm sure you do as well. Tell us about the transfer portal, Kayla, and just how much movement is going on there. It's not only recruiting of high school kids, it's re-recruiting and other programs grabbing players that want to maybe play closer to home or in a better situation.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to see the kids who play 4 years at one program and then will move on for their 5th year, for their graduate year, to a different program. There's a lot of kids doing that. A lot of kids who are freshmen who didn't have a good experience for whatever reason and are looking for new homes. I think that's probably the most prevalent thing that I've seen in the transfer portal. It's a lot of rising sophomores. But, with the Ivy League deciding that they wouldn't allow their student athletes to come back for the extra year, you have a bunch of Ivy League kids in there. You have a bunch of Patriot League kids too, because a lot of those mid-major programs, as Michaela was alluding to, just cannot afford to bring back their kids for another year. So they have to make the tough decision to go try to find another program that will allow them to play, because as Alex was saying, there aren't a ton of opportunities for women athletes, for women softball players to make money after college playing softball. So, people are trying to hold on as long as they can. And it's unfortunate that it has to be that way, but I understand why the portal is so full. It's just because, you've worked so hard for so long and you've gotten to this point that you finally feel like you've figured it out by your senior year, and then, it's taken from you. So, it's going to be interesting to see if those people are actually able to find a home for next season.
Michaela, how often are you and the staff at Mizzou checking the transfer portal and monitoring that? What is that like for a Division I program right now?
Yeah, it's on our favorite tab up there for sure. So we're always looking at it, just to see the movement, even see who's going where or who is kind of leaving a certain place often. But it's crazy because it's not that it's so easy now, but it's much easier now to become a transfer athlete because this is readily available to them, whereas before it was almost word of mouth. So it's the numbers of transfers have increased because the availability is there. And I think that's one thing that has definitely changed the game in softball. It's almost that recruiting the kid that's somewhere else already. Not that that's actually going on, but you see that they play somewhere and their numbers are so good, and then they're on that transfer portal. It's like, we want that kid, bring her over, So it's recruiting kids that have not come to college yet, and now it's a whole new level of recruiting those transfers too.
Right. Elise, as a former transfer yourself, put yourself, in the shoes of players today. Like, what was your thought process back then, and how do you think that would change now?
I mean, I think I actually have a lot of people, parents and players that ask me kind of their opinions on transferring. And the biggest advice I can give is the grass is not always greener on the other side. Everyone wants to put down the program they're currently at and then list all of the negative things. But once they get to another program, hopefully, and you're looking for those specific things to get better, those negatives on your list to become positives. But that doesn't mean that you're also not going to have a list of other negatives that were not negatives at the previous school, right? So forget about even just COVID in general and why people are getting into the transfer portal now. When I was transferring, it was just for the simple fact that I wanted to go somewhere else because of some negatives, right? So again, like I say to some players that kind of address to me like, oh, well, what if, I'm not too happy here? Number one thing, obviously, as a travel ball coach is I have to tell them to get on the portal. But then the second thing is you have to really make a pros and cons list and evaluate what those negatives are and evaluate what your positives are at that school, because those could become negatives at that next school. I was very fortunate when I went to Fordham, and I'm very thankful for Bridget Orchard for giving the opportunity. But I've had this conversation with her in the past, just because I went to Fordham and I was coached by her and there was a lot of positive things. There were also some other things that I preferred at my previous school. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Alex, I want to take you back 4 years to when you were coming out of high school and you were being recruited. What sort of things factored into your decision to go to the University of Kentucky? And if you were coming out today, how different or similar would your evaluation process be? Do you think you would still have gone to Kentucky?
Yeah, I think the recruiting process is way different now. I committed when I was 15 years old, and now, it's different where you can't speak with the kids or anyone until like September of their junior year, if that's correct. And it's so different. And I remember being a 15-year-old who hadn't even made the varsity softball team yet as a freshman, trying to talk to college coaches and try and figure out what I want for my future. And, it really helped. The fact of my dad really helped me a lot. He was really the one that he asked me one day, do you want to play Division I softball? I said yes. And from there, we just went with it. I sent over 300 to 400 emails, to everyone. Everyone was getting emails because nobody's going to know who Alex Martens from McHenry is unless you tell them who Alex Martens from McHenry is. People aren't looking for Alex Martens unless you tell them who you are. So you have to put your name out there and tell everyone, like, this is it. And don't worry about being annoying. Like, if you want to go there, you have to tell them you want to go there. So that was the thing that helped me, is that I kept putting my name out there, and finally something caught, and I got a call from Rachel Lawson, and things happened like that. And I went to a trip, and as soon as I walked on campus, it's so cliche to say, but when my values lined up with what their values were. My goals lined up with what their goals were. It wasn't about the things that they had to give me, like the nice hitting barn and all the clothes and things that you could get that at any Division I school. But when your values line up with the values of the head coach, that's when relationships are built. And I stayed there for 4 years, and I love my coaches with all my heart. So it's those kind of things that are kind of different. And now with the transfer portal, I see people going in all the time, and I wish if maybe it'd be different if it was how it is now, where you can't commit until you're older, because my generation, we all did commit so young that you don't really know, like Chris said, you don't know your goals yet. You don't know what you want yet. So hopefully with the way that things are changing now, like, people are really trying to figure out what they want from not just what the school can give them, but what they can give to the school and to the program. But looking at it now, it is really crazy. And I know that this COVID-19 pandemic is going to affect a lot of people, and the way that they are doing recruiting and the way that they're evaluating each other and communication. But advice to people from high school trying to get recruited is to continue putting your name out there and make sure that coaches know your name, that you can start building relationships. Even though they might not be able to talk to you, you can still send them things. Like, I'm sure, like, Michaela, you guys get so much stuff from players. Some of it, you can't always take everyone, but some of it might catch your eye. You never know what somebody's going to see, and click, boom, now you're on a visit, and you're going to your dream school. So it's just, you have to build relationships the best way that you can.
What does catch your eye, Michaela? If you're, you got 1 or 2 spots, and you're looking to fill a need, either a utility player or an extra hitter or fielder or whatever, what's going to catch your eye if if there's an aspiring girl out there that really wants to play Division I and doesn't really have any offers?
The thing that we look at most is just, are they athletic? We want athletic kids that then once they come to us, even if they're a little not refined, totally not all the way tuned up, that we can take them and then make them into the player that we need for our program. So if you're athletic, you play multiple sports, you're able to move well, you have quick feet, and then add in that hitting part, you're going to find a spot for yourself in any program, So we're really just looking for those kids that, like Alex said, puts their name out there all the time, is putting in the work. And a lot of the stuff comes through on social media now, which is a huge difference even from when I was getting recruited, which was, it seems like not that long ago, but the Twitter and Instagram and posting their videos on there, that's something that catches our eye a lot. And when we keep seeing that same name come up over and over and over again, you remember that kid. So just like Alex said, don't be afraid to be annoying. Keep putting your name out there, keep putting those videos out there and show off what you have.
I want to turn, I want to shift gears and move along to the classes of 21 and 22. We've touched on that a little bit, and I want to go to you, Chris, because you mentioned the domino effect and how this could, what's happening now could last years, down the road. What are you telling your kids, not only in terms of level of play, but fit of the school, which is increasingly important now, especially in the times that we are, with much of the country, still in the red or yellow phase?
So I'll echo some things we've talked about already, that the girls have brought up. It's kind of weird for me in a way. I look at softball players and I have to see the big picture, right? There's 100 kids maybe playing in the NPF. Fortunately, it gives me the opportunity to talk to almost any kid and say, look, you're probably not going to the NPF. I can tell because there's only 100 of them, so it's probably not going to be you. And even if you get there, in any sport, really, the average career length of a professional athlete is 3 years or less. So the way I look at it is it's not really about softball. It's paradoxical. Don't get me wrong. Softball is incredibly important, right? I just turned 55. I wish I was still pitching. I want every kid to play as long as they possibly can. So to me, at least, the game is important enough, but we got to see more than the game, right? So I have to put softball in the proper global context of not just college, but beyond college. I try to get 16 years out. When I sit down with kids, I say, what are you going to be doing 16 years from now when you're done playing softball? They still may not know, right? They may not have clarity, but I want them to think about it, because then we're going to try to work backwards. Your college path, ideally, should enable your career path. Your recruiting path is going to enable your college path. So again, to go back, right, we spent a lot of time talking about goals. The other thing, again, to look at the 21s, the frightening thing about this whole COVID dynamic, not just COVID, right? We've just layered a whole bunch of other things onto this now, right? What are we supposed to do? There are kids that are sitting there on their hands because they don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What am I supposed to do? The coach can't come see me. I can't go there. It seems like nobody's doing nothing. We're all just sitting here looking at each other. But recruiting never stops. Do you want to win games? Do you want to keep your job? Do you want to move up the ladder? Recruiting doesn't stop ever, right? So Alex kind of touched on this. Don't sit there. It's not over. Kayla touched on this. Things have changed. So what are we going to do that's different? Coach can't come out to see you play. So what does coach need to get elsewhere to know what kind of player you may be in his or her program? How do you project? What are you going to be if you come here? It was also talked about building relationships. I said this earlier. Everything we're doing now is just training for 20 years from now. If you look at what I do, when I'm working with a softball player, I say, look, everything we're doing now is the same thing we're going to do 12 years from now if we were working with you to help you find a real job in the real world. Knowing how to build relationships, productive relationships, how to do proper networking I don't think there's anything more important than being able to pull that out. And remember, I'm a guy who wore a lab coat at his head in the corner of a fume hood for 40 years, right? I'm not formally a relationship guy, but there's probably nothing more important than that. BG, I don't even know if I've answered your question, have I?
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Can I add something to what Chris said?
Please, Alex.
I love that you said, like softball is important, obviously, but when choosing a school, I want to give the advice of like, one, you want to have as many options as possible, but you can't choose a school for softball only. Like you have to think about education wise. If you get hurt and you can't play softball ever again, are you still going to want to go to school there? Are you still going to want to get a degree from that university? Are you still going to be able to achieve what you want to achieve from that university? So like, I personally went to Kentucky because they had the same values, because I knew that athletic department would get me where I wanted to go, but also that university is amazing. I love the school, the campus. It gave me a major that is very specific to what I want to do in advertising. And we've done so many things, like the athletic department does financial meetings with us and all these things to set us up to be good humans and good people, not just good softball players. So it's really important to really think about what university you want to go to, as well as what team you want to play for.
Absolutely. Elise, what are you telling some of the younger players that come through your program and you come into contact with, the 21s, the 22s, even the 23s, that, their heads are probably spinning like everybody else?
Yeah. I mean, I love what Alex said. I think that everything that she said is, regardless of what's going on in the country today or in the world today, you can only control what you can control. Right. So I hear a lot about, even from old players, old teammates. Kayla's one of them. Like, we talk about what's currently happening today, but we have no control over what's going to happen tomorrow, regardless of the pandemic that's happening. So we really need to focus on exactly what Alex said, is what do we want out of our future? What do we want out of tomorrow? And then, like Chris said, what do you want in the next 15, 16 years? Right. So I don't really see, I really try to stay away with my players on, what the problem is right now. It's really what you can control, right? As a hitting coach, that's what I'm saying from a hitting philosophy. We want to make sure that what your movements are consistent every single day, because then you have to add the variables of a pitcher coming in, which are different speeds, different movements, if they're throwing 3 different speeds, right? So if we can control just what our body is doing, what our mind is doing, then we can well adapt to what's happening in society and what's happening into our game. It's not, I think the biggest thing that I've learned playing for Rhode Island Thunder and playing for Dave Lottie is that this has set me up for my life. And I take what he taught me and what Bridget Orchard taught me at Fordham and life lessons. It's not just about softball. It's what sets me up in my career. And that's why I'm still involved with the game today, because I do feel that my sophomore, junior, and senior year in high school has helped me and shaped me the person I am today. And that has nothing to do with the pandemic. That has nothing to do with the person that's competing next to me. It's what I can control every single day to help me to my future. And if you live your life, not just with softball, but if you live your life like that, controlling only what you can control, and I'll never forget this. And this is probably one of the things that I definitely think about at least weekly. Kayla was a roommate of mine my junior and senior year of college. And her father told her, you only wake up every day with so much energy, right? And if you wake up thinking or putting energy in things that don't matter, then you're not going to have enough energy to put them to things that actually are important. And I graduated in 2014, and I still think about that today. So I definitely try to bring that into my kids every day. It's not about this pandemic. We have parents, even like, let's shift a little bit to the parents of these kids that want to go and get a higher education and play softball, doing it for the next 4 years. Because like Chris said, there's only 100 females in the pro league, right? So the parents have to deal with, or have to figure out financially what's going to happen. And luckily enough for someone like me, or like their players, let the parents have to deal with the financial aspect. I mean, for all those parents out there, I mean, that's your job, is to make sure that your kid is taken care of, and you're going to make every possible path or avenue available to them. That's what you're there. That's why you brought them into this world, so you could take care of them. So my job and what I try to tell, just like I've been saying with the amount of energy you're giving, is you can only control what you do every day and what energy you want to put into every path of your life. And if you do that, then when you're a 2021, and I've seen some things on Twitter that, they're going to Wright University and now they have to look for new programs, then you deal with that. When that comes up, then you deal with that. But if you're living your life wondering if that's going to happen, then you're going to make decisions for the wrong reasons. Just wait for that to happen. And I guarantee you, with the support that I've seen in 2 days on Twitter for these kids, they're going to find homes and it's going to be okay. But all you can do is control your emotions, your effort, day in and day out, and good things are going to happen.
So can I piggyback real quick? I'll be short on Elise. I don't have to explain this to you guys because you know what the value of playing is, right? What's the real long-term value of being a highly competitive team athlete? Not everybody sees that. Yeah, I was just listening to you over there. I have a stack of papers that we often circulate, right? Major outlets, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes, Washington Post. It's the same story over and over again. You know what it is? It's why employers prefer to hire athletes. So everything you said, not pre-COVID, it's the same thing. Okay, we added a couple extra layers just to see who could handle it. But it's how do you learn to get through life, man? How do you navigate this stuff? 20 years later, you're going to be confronted with some situation in the workplace, and you'll be like, "Oh, you kidding me? I know how to handle this. I did that my sophomore year in college. This is easy." So that's kind of the way we look at it.
Got it. Kayla, I've known you for a long time, and I know how much the game means to you and how big of a part of your life it's been for most of your life. What would your current self tell your 17 or 18-year-old self, knowing what you know now, if you were going through the process right now?
I would tell myself to stop taking everything so seriously. So I think, Elise spoke to the point of wanting to control things that are outside of your control. That was like my MO my whole life, pretty much, playing the game. So, I would maybe let the game come to me a little bit more. I would still work just as hard as I did, especially, if I were in a, the COVID world right now that we're in and trying to get recruited. Now is the time to go out and get better. I mean, you don't have to worry about the pressure of performing. You don't have to worry about playing in front of coaches right now. Like, you can literally go out there, hit, work out, try to get better at something in your game where you have a bit of a hole. And it's kind of going to separate people. I think once the game comes back, you're going to see who spent this downtime really trying to get better. So, I would be working hard, but I would also try to tell myself that it is a game. It's supposed to be fun. And the more fun that you have when you play, the better off you are going to be in your performance. So I think, it's a catch-22. You think like, oh man, if I'm having fun, then I'm not going to be performing well, or, but that's not the case. Like, you need to just chill and you need to let the game come to you, and just trust that your hard work is going to pay off, and you're going to find the right spot for you. Things happen that are serendipitous in the recruiting process. So even if you do everything right, you still might not end up where you think you'll end up. It's a guessing game sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love so much about softball, college softball, is for young girls, young women. It is the pros, no matter what level you get to. No disrespect to the NPF, where there are only 16s, but Division I college softball and even Division II, Division III, it's at such a high level, and there are more and more opportunities. Michaela, if you could speak to how the game has grown ever since, even since you've played. Missouri went obviously from the Big 12 to the SEC, and now you guys have been a player. Talk a little bit about college softball, not only at the Division I level, but the 2 and 3 level, and the opportunity for young women, to play at the ultimate level.
I think starting off with that, the first thing that has grown tremendously is just the airtime that we get now, as opposed to even when I was playing 2 years ago. So it's on ESPN in preseason, and now it was going to be on a lot in postseason as well. And just the exposure that softball is getting is so much more. You know, people want to watch, people want to come to these preseason tournaments. Get sold out. We went to Florida twice, and in both tournaments were sold out. You couldn't get a ticket to come in, and the stands were packed. You felt like you were in the World Series, and it was a preseason tournament, which is just amazing for our game. And there's a lot of growth that's going on throughout the entire softball community. And I think the next step is going to be getting some of these D2, D3 programs to get some airtime as well.
Right. Kayla, the other night you brought up the notion of stacking both academic and athletic money, something I'm sure you had to be creative with, not only in your own playing time, but as a coach at Lehigh. Kind of explain to everybody what that is and how that works and how important that is for players today.
Sure. I think there's a misconception that all this money exists in softball for scholarships, and that's just not the case. I mean, we have a max of 12 scholarships, 12 full scholarships. And as Michaela said, she'll have 34 players on her roster. And, you know, it's common to have somewhere between 22 and 24 players typically in a normal year. So you have to spread that money out. So some schools decide to combine academic and athletic money, and that's why we call it stacking. But a lot of schools don't do that. So it varies by the program. It's really not something that follows a linear path. It changes, you know, based on whichever program you're looking at. So I think that those are important questions to ask when you get in front of a coach. You have to ask those hard questions like, hey, is there an opportunity for me to get academic money and athletic money, or is it one or the other? Because then that can kind of change the financial game in terms of how much you're going to have to take out in loans and how much you might have to pay, you know, after graduation and for how long. So I think those are really important things to consider and important questions to ask.
Great. Thank you, Kayla. Alex, you mentioned that you had to send out lots of emails and essentially how to recruit the school just as much as they recruited you. For players at each level, can you talk about how best to work with your high school coach to get notice? Is it direct contact with a college coach? Is that better than the high school coach reaching out? Obviously, it's different situations, but you know, and certainly in your experience, was it you reaching out directly? Were you working with your high school coach? How did that process work for you?
Personally, my high school coach, I love him. He had absolutely nothing to do with my recruiting process. It was my travel ball coach. I went from one elite program to an even elite program and played with Illinois Chill. So my coach, Jerry, he knew what he was doing. And I went to that program as a freshman specifically to play Division I softball. So if you, whatever division you want to, or you think that you have the capability to play at, you have to work with, so it's usually travel ball coaches. I don't know if high school coaches do a lot of recruiting for you, but he was kind of like the middleman for me. I mean, if he said someone was interested, I would make them at the top of my list for emails. But I mean, every school in the country was getting an email from me, basically Division I through Division III. It just depends on who is getting those personalized, you know. I really am. I heard that you were interested, so how are you doing? My name's Alex, nice to meet you, kind of thing. But for my process personally, it was my travel ball coach that had a huge hand on building the relationship too. Like him and Coach Lawson have a great relationship. They're friends. That was just a bonus, I guess. So it's things like that.
Elise, how are you telling your girls in your program to really connect with college coaches at any level?
Well, first off, like Alex said, you have to put yourself, once you understand what level you want to play at, and you are understanding exactly what level you can play at. That's the first challenge, is understanding that, you know, it's not, kids don't come to me and say, am I a Division I athlete? Can I go? No, but you also need to put in the time. You need to compare yourself to kids your own age and figure out exactly what level you think that you can play at and be realistic, and then to our previous points, align that with academics, of course. So, Alex said that she went to the Illinois Chill, which is a great program, right? So she knew exactly when she made that team that she was going to get offers from Division I school. So once you align yourself with that type of program, then you know that you're kind of like, you take that deep breath of you're in a position where you have a head coach, you have a staff that has X amount of years of experience. Okay. So specifically in our case, I've been back with my program for 4 years. I was with them playing for 4 years, but the program itself has been around for 22. So right away, you have 22 years of experience of college coaches that have left programs, gone to D2, D3, climbed from D3 to D1. So they have a phone book. Okay. Obviously we don't carry usually those nowadays, but they have these connections to be able to reach out for you. And that's basically the first step. After that, yes, the hundreds and hundreds of emails, that makes sense. Now, more so now, I think Michaela mentioned this earlier, how important something like Twitter is nowadays. So for me, it started about in January, even before COVID hit. Like I said, I have my 2022 class, I have 10 of them. So I'm a little bit anxious come September 1st. I want to make sure that all of my kids at least get 2 phone calls from college coaches. I don't want to feel like anyone is left behind in that process with their peers. So I encourage them to post a video a week on Twitter, and they had to text me their video with their caption explaining what they're going to post. And basically I would say yay or nay or add this or that to appeal to the college coach. That has been probably, outside of obviously getting to a team that has connections, that has been the number one thing that now, especially that COVID has hit, to get kids on the map. Now, one thing I do want to dive into is, might be a little bit off track, but just the tagging of college coaches on Twitter. Personally, I don't allow our kids to tag anyone because I don't want them to limit themselves to certain college coaches. Because so much is being circulated, I'm not afraid of kids not being seen, right, through Twitter. Or I'm even telling them, a short 3-sentence, my name is, I play this position, I play on this team, in an email, and they attach a photo of them, because let's be honest, a lot of college coaches were Division I athletes or some division athlete, and they're visual learners. So by putting your face on the end of a document allows them to actually notice who you are, and then attaching a video. So if they're not seeing on Twitter, they're going to see a video that's on an email, probably more so than skimming the email itself. So that has been a huge aspect of the recruiting process, I would say, since January, no matter how this pandemic has affected us. But it's very interesting to see, and I'd be curious to know what Michaela and Kayla and Alex, or basically anyone, has to say about what college coaches have been tagged. Like I said, I don't allow our kids to tag because it limits them from who is going to be seen. And I've also been reached out to by college coaches that say, hey, I know that she doesn't play for you, but I know you give hitting lessons to her, or she's in your area. Do you know who she is? Do you know why she didn't tag us? We live 30 minutes. Our university is 30 minutes from us. We're interested in them, but they didn't tag us. Does that mean that they want to go out of state? So it brings up a lot of questions. And let's be honest, we're all people here, right? So a coach that does not get tagged, their feelings get hurt a little bit. And we just want to stay on the most even playing field as possible.
So Elise, real quick then, because there's another side to that coin.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like what you said about don't limit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to limit yourself? But some of the feedback we get sometimes from coaches is they don't want to be tagged. It's sort of like the second generation after email, right? Coaches get so many emails. They get hundreds of emails a day. They're buried in emails. And now the next generation is they're all being tagged on Twitter by everybody, regardless of whether the kid has a remote chance of playing there or not. So a lot of them are like, I don't want to be tagged. We can get to that point at the right point if it's necessary, but I don't like being tagged. Do you have perspective on that, or anyone else?
Well, just one more comment on that. I think one of the things, it's not very common, but one of the responses from college coaches I have heard back is it's not so much the talent of the kid posting, it's the quality of the video. So if you tag a college coach, let's say you only tag 3 because they're local, you're just starting the process, and you're a very talented player, and let's say you can possibly play at that school and have an impact at that university or college. That video quality might not be great. Could be 3 minutes long where it's boring. It could be bad quality in terms of just the pixels. So by tagging that school, and like I said, this is firsthand information from a college, they don't want to be tagged in a bad quality video compared to the Power 5, specifically even the SEC, who get these athletes go live, quality videos of great athletes, and they get that tagged in them versus the other. So it might not even have to do with your quality as a player and what talent you have, but just the camera itself might not be something that a college wants to be associated with.
That's long been one of my favorite topics. If we want to talk about video, we could probably do a whole hour on that.
Yeah, I want to give Michaela, as a Division I coach right now, the tag or not to tag question.
So I personally get tagged pretty often, at least a couple times a day. But I enjoy it. I like to see some of those kids come back up. I like the personal DMs. Obviously I can't respond, but when a kid sends their video in and you're able to see it, I think that just keeps their name in the back of your mind. And then all of a sudden they show up to a camp or they show up, on the recruiting trail, and it's like, oh, I remember that kid, she DMs me her videos often, or I see this here and there often. So I think it points names out personally. But again, there's times where it's like, well, why are you tagging all those people? And I don't see Missouri in there. So it is a little bit of a give and take, but personally, I enjoy it.
One thing, we had a baseball recruiting webinar last Thursday, and one thing that came up that surprised me was there's actually a TikTok channel for baseball players to post their videos. It's not just Twitter. So have any of you, is that a thing in softball? I'm still trying to understand exactly what TikTok is. I know I'm deep.
I know that teams in general, honestly, just because of social media, and I'm like I said, I told my kids to start posting in January, and it was odd for me and honestly awkward because then I have to retweet them, and I'm retweeting like 10 videos a day, and some of them I don't want to retweet and some of them I do. And so social media is a very interesting thing for me as well. So I've encouraged our team to make a TikTok. They have yet to do so. But I think that personally, it shows their personality. So, Alex has mentioned this from the player's perspective and getting recruited. I don't know how many times I've heard from a friend in the coaching world, and they say that, hey, so-and-so came on campus. We really like her athletically, but she didn't really talk much. I don't really know much about her. So I think that things like social media, specifically TikTok, obviously can be harmful because there's things out there you don't want to do, but it also can show a little bit of your personality if you're doing it the right way. I don't know of the softball aspect of what you're talking about for baseball. I don't know of anything like that. I hope that my kids are not involved with that because I should know about it. But I do think there are ways to get noticed to show your personality, because let's face it, if September 1, you can't have any contact with them, which and in most ways, I agree with that change 2 years ago, but you can't get to know a kid's personality that well when it's the kid and the parent and the other parent and sometimes a grandparent, and they say 5 words in the whole day. How are you going to, on an official visit or an unofficial visit, fully understand what that kid is going to be and what kind of person they're going to be? And that's where, again, it goes back to the travel ball organization you're a part of, because they can speak on your leadership qualities and the type of person you are because they're well respected. But I don't know about any TikTok specific softball.
What do you think? What is the best social media channel for players to post? Is it Twitter? What are you monitoring?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's Twitter. Instagram is a little bit more of like what Elise was talking about, where you see the personality or what they kind of do in their spare time. But we are monitoring social media like no other. And if we see one thing we don't like, you're off that list. And that goes for a lot of coaches out there. So social media can be a huge benefit to recruiting, but it can also get you crossed off the list pretty quickly. But right now, Twitter and Instagram are definitely the two main channels that we use. We, as Missouri softball, do have a TikTok, and our girls get on there and start dancing and doing some of those fun things, but we're not using that as a recruiting tool just yet.
So can I ask this? Do any of you guys do Snapchat? I'm like, I don't even know what Snapchat is. I follow all my kids. It's mandatory, right? I got to follow your social media because I got to know what you're doing.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I don't want to do Snapchat, but I'm wondering, I'm like, do I need to follow Snapchat? Do you guys use Snapchat?
Well, I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of these young kids, these prospective student athletes, need to keep in mind is you're being watched. It's not going to go away. You can't just erase some of these things. And when you put it out there, everybody can see it. So I think staying in that idea that if I want to get recruited, I'm going to get recruited through different social media aspects, from how my parents act, how I act. There's all these different things that go into it. Right. And if there's a kid with a parent who's being a jerk at the field, we don't want to deal with that come 4 years from now. So there's all these different things that go into it. And as a prospective student athlete, you have to understand that a college coach is looking at all aspects.
So that's like a yes, I got to start doing Snapchat?
Yes.
I'll chime in a little bit with Snapchat. I don't follow my kids on Snapchat because it's more of a direct relationship. It's more of like a direct DM. So I don't do that, but I definitely let them know that just because something, so basically the gist of Snapchat is I can take a picture, it appears for so many seconds that you allow, and then it's gone. But the fact of the matter is someone can screenshot it, someone can save that picture in different forms, and that's evolving every day. So like I said, I don't follow them, but again, to Michaela's point, you have to make sure that you're telling your kids that just because you think it's only going to appear for 5 seconds, something that you take a picture of can last a lifetime, and it could be extremely hurtful to your career and your future.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Michaela, and I'd love for you, Elise, to weigh in. Do you guys monitor parents' social media accounts as well? Mm-hmm.
Yes. As much as we can learn about the kid, we dive right into that. And not just from a recruiting aspect, but also our kids on our roster. It's not that we're monitoring it, but what we're seeing is definitely we want to make sure that they're aligning with our morals and our beliefs and what our team wants to do. We don't want this, rogue parent or rogue kid going off and saying all this stuff, and then it comes back on Mizzou softball. So that's definitely, we have some of the most amazing parents and most amazing kids on our roster, and it really starts in the recruiting process. If you don't get to know the kid, you don't get to know the coach and the parents, and that relationship isn't formed, then you don't know what you're getting into. And we have a roster full of just amazing kids with amazing parents, and it all starts at the recruiting process.
So given that, what are you telling parents, Elise, like essentially how to behave?
Well, first off, I have the luxury of not having to follow my kids or my parents on my personal page because I have 2 pages because I oversee 2 of our 14U and 18U levels. And then we also have our showcase page that I manage. So I have 3 different forms of pages and then 3 different forms of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where I can look at that and they don't actually know that I'm looking at it. So I think the biggest thing as far as parents go is we're a little bit old school in this way. And again, I played for Thunder and now I coach and I came back for a reason, but no coach, no person wants to see you bragging about your kids. So I think the biggest advice that we give our parents is it's one thing to retweet what your kid does to get them out there. And it's another thing to write a novel about how their first team all state Now for us in Rhode Island, first team all state, I mean, there's 50 good players in the state. So like saying that your kid made first team all state, what, 10 kids? Like that's not something that you really want to share, because even though that's a great accolade, and something you can put when your college program asks you to fill out all of your accolades that you get, that doesn't mean that's something that you want to share. So that's the number one thing from a travel organization that we try to do, is minimize the bragging, let's call it, of what's happening with their kid, and focus more on your teammates' kid or your kid's teammates, and commenting on what they're doing, and show more of a teammate type of love. Because going back to what Michaela was saying, or other college coaches, imagine going to number 5 on the team, and you see that they have a video, and then you see in the comments a kid that's committed to you, a parent is saying, congratulations, nice job. That's a parent that I'm glad that I recruited that kid, right? So that's kind of how we reinforce that, is try to show less about or make comments about what your kid is doing. Retweeting is one thing, because you're not directly commenting, you're just putting that on your page, but then showing that you're showing love to your teammates, or your kid teammates.
So one thing I would say is that I wish the collective we would make that message louder and stronger and more obvious, actually, because parents don't get it. I mean, some of them, they just really don't get it. And I don't entirely know why. And sometimes, I mean, I've got in these debates, arguments, fights almost. They're like, why are you going to hold the behavior of the parent against the kid? I'm like, you don't understand what coach is thinking in her head right now. Right? Is your name Jenny Finch? Is it Rachel Garcia? Is it Lauren Chamberlain? Because if it's not, she's going to find somebody just as good as your kid, and she's not going to have to deal with all that extra baggage and the extra risk and the extra headaches. So I've actually, this is funny in a way. I've been toying with this idea of putting together a class to teach parents how to be proper sports parents. Some of it's understanding the game, but it's like how not to be a damn fool down at the game. Because
it's a great idea. I would love to know what the topics would be in order to keep them in line, because parents will always be parents, but I would definitely applaud the idea of doing
but again, I'm sure you've all seen stories, right? I mean, I go to games sometimes, and there's somebody I don't even know. I'm like, can you just move over there and be quiet? Because you're hurting your kid.
I think a good rule of thumb as a parent, we know that you're passionate. We know you love your child and you want the best for your daughter and you want her to excel, but be seen and not heard. And that really is something that cheering and being excited about your kid playing and the team winning is one thing, but kind of going at the umpires or going at the other coach or whatever it might be, and now you're being heard, that's like, okay, whose parent is that? Because, let's cross them off. Yeah. But I think that's a good rule of thumb. Just be seen and heard.
The last thing I'll say about what we say to the parents, and this is probably the very first thing that we say, is if there is a college coach that follows us, or a group of them that follow us, we have like 5 games that day and they follow us all day. If they were sitting next to you, by the end of the day, if we said, do you know whose parent that kid is? They should say no. And if they don't know by the end of the day that, that parent is associated with that kid, or that parent is associated with that kid, then you did exactly what you were supposed to do. You cheered for everyone equally. You didn't get too high. You didn't get too low. You did what you were supposed to be doing during the game.
Right. I want to bring it back to the kids now, and I want to come to you, Kayla. We're in a situation where in most parts of the country, a lot of kids can't get in groups out on fields. I know you've done a lot of virtual instruction with your kids. What sort of things can players at all levels do right now to keep their bodies sharp and ready, before play actually opens up wide across the country?
There's a ton of drills that you can do from the comfort of your own living room. So I know at least a lot of the people I follow are also instructors who are offering virtual lessons right now. And really all you need is like a tennis ball and your hands to work on your glove skills. And, if you have a partner, you can get out in your backyard, you can do some soft toss, you can do some tee work if you have a tee. There's always something that you can be doing to better your game. You can improve your body too. You can improve your endurance. If you're a pitcher, you can improve, your spins, you can improve your endurance. All that is really important. And that's stuff that you will do once you get to college too. You will be reliant on your body a lot. You spend a lot of time in the weight room as a college athlete. So, trying to get ahead on that as much as you can right now and putting that time into, some of the mechanical stuff and the stuff that isn't as thought about, but is really important to break down and to work on. Those are the things that you can really be perfecting right now and spending a lot of time on right now.
Alex, I want to go to you. What sort of things would you do differently now if you were being recruited today?
That's a hard question because like I don't live with much regret. Like I don't think I could. I don't know. Like it's so different now that when I look at the way that I was recruited, I'm almost happy that I was recruited that way because it allowed me to build relationships earlier. I was building relationships with coaches when I was a freshman. I wasn't making the decision because I wasn't going to commit too early. That's your decision. You know what I mean? Like you are the committer. The coach isn't forcing you to. And if they are, that's probably not the right coach for you because they're not caring about your best interest. They're caring about their best interest. So it really, it goes back to the relationship side of it. Like it's all about relationships, and that's finding a place that someone wants to help you get where you want to go and you want to help them get to where they want to go. So I'm thankful that the way I went through my recruiting process, some people my age wouldn't be able to say that because they've transferred too many times and they couldn't find a forever home. But I'm just happy that I had the gut feeling, and like Kentucky wasn't even on my radar until I stepped foot on campus, and then I committed on the spot. So it's like that. And then I was there for 4 years. It's those gut feelings that you have to just trust and go with it. So try and make a contact, try and build relationships the best way you can, whether it's through Twitter. The whole Twitter and social media thing, it's weird to me because that wasn't a thing when I was getting recruited. I never posted anything. I have one YouTube video out there circulating of me slapping. I'm not a slapper anymore. So like it didn't affect me too much. But if you have to make contact through Twitter and things like that to get your name out there, do whatever you can to get your name out there. They have to know who you are in order to recruit you.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more questions before we'll finish with a lightning round. This one's for you, Chris. What year do most of your athletes start the college selection process? Is freshman year too early?
Well, that depends on each student athlete, right? So great question, first of all. I will tell you that most of the time, in my experience, I prefer to start a student athlete somewhere during the sophomore year. Why the sophomore year? Well, because I have two important, the first reason, to be honest with you, is there are, how should I say this? There are other entities out there that will sit down with kids that are very, very young with the goal of getting them to sign on in a program. It's not about what that kid needs, it's about what they need as a business. And so I kind of like to stay away from that area. But the reality is there's a right time. They will say you can never get started too early. Well, of course that's wrong. You absolutely can get started too early. And I can give you a number of examples. There's a right time for every student athlete. For me to generalize, in a lot of cases, that's somewhere in the sophomore year. Why? I want to get two questions answered. Number one, can that kid play somewhere in college? I may not know what level yet. May not know if that's a D1, D2, or a D3 kid, but can that kid play somewhere in college? And the more important question is that what the student athlete really wants to do? Is she willing to invest and embrace in all the things, not just on the field, but off the field, that she needs to do, not just to enable the opportunity, but to be successful once she gets there? And if I can get an affirmative answer to those two questions sometime during the sophomore year, then we've retained maximal timeline to do all the things we need to do to create the opportunities that we're looking for. But again, it can depend. One year I had 3 kids we didn't start working with until a month after they graduated from high school. Some kids mature late. Sometimes there are other issues. Even now, we've talked about this. There's 2020s out there that could still find opportunities to play right now. right? If they know what their goals are and they know what to do, they know how to find the right place. So I answer a lot of questions with it depends. And so it's sort of, it depends, but to generalize, I like the sophomore year many, many times.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more question before we get to our lightning round. This one's for you, Michaela. One viewer asked, are parents allowed to have a conversation with the coach or coaches, or do coaches not allow parents to?
Well, obviously that's after September 1 of their junior year, and we love to bring in parents because we want to get to know the whole family. And I think that happens at a lot of places, especially in softball. It's not just the kid, it's the whole family. We're recruiting a family. We want them to feel like we're their second family. So yeah, we encourage the parents to come to camps, come to everything you can so we can get to know you, and I think that goes for everywhere.
Great, thank you. We're coming down to the very end here, so I'm going to finish with a lightning round, and I'm going to emphasize lightning. And I'm talking to you, Chris.
I got you, BJ.
You got, real brief. In 3 pieces, your top 3 pieces of advice for a high school player who wants to get recruited. What are the top 3 things? Alex, I'm going to start with you.
Top 3 things in a lightning round, and then I have to process it.
Yes.
Top 3 things. Okay. 1, if you got hurt and could never play softball again, do you still want to go to this university? 2, do your values and your goals line up with what the coach and the program's values and goals are? And 3, does the color of the uniform match your complexion?
Yes.
Love it.
That's great. That is solid right there.
I got my stopwatch on. So.
Who's that, me?
Chris.
Oh, I'm next? Okay. Number 1, I would say the number 1 mistake made in the process is poor follow-up. A number of people touched on this. Alex kind of hit it a lot, different ways, but poor follow-up. And it's the same skills you're going to need later when you go to get a real job in the real world. So when you get interest from a coach, you think it's over. 100 other kids got the same interest, man. The game just started. Got to know how to follow up properly. Number 2, there's often a rush to the college list. Some people will say you start with the college list. No, you don't start with the college list. I don't even know who the heck to put on it right now. So in our world, you got to do 3 things before you get to the college list. You got to have that goals discussion. You have to do an athletic assessment, and you need an academic assessment. Those 3 things work together to determine the college list. And number 3 is, I'll try to do a catch-all. Probably 95% of all players and families have their fingers crossed. Spend a lot of time and money and energy. They're traveling all over the country. They got private coaches are making video. They hope somebody taps them on the shoulder. They need a plan. Just like anything else important in your life, you need a plan if you want to enable it. So you got to have a plan. You got to have the right plan. And then some of these guys talked about it. You have to stay consistent to the plan and execute the plan and control what you control. So those are my 3.
Okay, great. We'll give you a B for that. Michaela.
Thanks, BJ.
My turn. Okay. Number 1, softball is what you do. It's not who you are. Remember that. Keep that in mind. Number 2, you do not have to be perfect when you play this game. You're going to learn more from the game of failure in your failures than you are going to learn from your successes. And number 3, do your coaches care about you as a person, and do your coaches care about things that you care about? If winning is one of those things, then don't go to a program that loses because you're going to be unhappy. If if it's more about the fun of softball, then maybe look for a program that has more fun. If it's about developing as a player, look for a coach who wants to develop you as a player. Do your homework. Ask people who have been to that program before. Ask people who are playing for that program now when you're at camps. Talk to the players and make sure you know what you're getting into so that, as Alex said, that you are aligned with the values that you care about.
Michaela, your turn.
Top 3 things that high school kids need to think about. Okay. Number 1, I say, is grades. Focus on your grades, get good grades in high school, because that's going to carry into a lot of different scholarship opportunities, get good test scores, focus on your academics just as much as you're focusing on your athletics. Number two, I would say get in the best possible shape you can be in right now. Start early. Just get out there and find someone that can help you with that, whether that's just aerobically, getting your lungs under you, getting bigger, faster, stronger, whatever that might be. And then number three, be personable. Wherever you end up, wherever those visits are, unofficial, official, be personable. Let the coach get to know you. Don't be afraid to be yourself.
Great. Thank you. Elise, you have the last word.
Okay, so definitely the first one, like Michaela said, it's got to be grades. So not so much or topping on what she said. Don't be afraid to ask a college coach if they're fully funded and if they're allowed to stack, because that is a huge influence, like Kayla mentioned previously. So once you figure that out and you're having good grades, then obviously that's going to help you through the process. And you'll also be surprised at how many schools you go to that say that they're not fully funded, and you won't get hurt when they offer you certain scholarships, especially if you're not a pitcher or catcher. The second one is don't pick a school because of the coaching staff. Now, I know that's like a wide eye type thing. And honestly, it would be kind of iffy for me if I was going through the process again. But college coaches leave all the time. That doesn't mean that you can't, while you're going through the process, build good relationships, because even if you don't like the school, if you build a good relationship, you don't know where they're going to end up. If you commit September 2nd of your junior year, don't expect them to be there till September 2nd, entering your senior year of college. A lot of movement happens. And last thing, and this is going more of personal experience, you can only make the best decision in that moment. Hindsight is always 20/20. Okay, so there's no such thing as making a bad decision if you do your due diligence in that moment. And if you live like that, and if you're thinking that you're trying to make the best decision in that moment, then like Alex said, you're not going to be living with regret.
Terrific. Really good advice from all of our panelists. This concludes tonight's webinar on the new world of college softball recruiting. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today, and especially thank our panelists, Michaela, Elise, Alex, Kayla, and Chris. You guys were all terrific. So thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom with everybody. There are lots of changes ahead. For more information and more future events, please check out the 3-2 Foundation website. We hope to do more of these type of things and obviously in the community when we're able to do so. Also, please read Softball America, follow us on Twitter, follow Kayla. There's a lot of changes, a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of information out there. So again, thank you for joining us. Stay safe and healthy, everyone, and best of luck through the rest of this spring and the summer, and wherever your paths may lead you. So best of luck. Stay safe, stay healthy, and everybody have a good night.